There's a lot of talk about justice in the current world climate, and the way we define justice comes down to one of two things. In modern legal circles, justice really has to do with punishing someone for crime. It's giving them what they deserve or making sure that victims are cared for by the punishment of those who have committed the crime. In a number of the circles among college students that I deal with on a regular basis, justice has become something of a catchword for sex trafficking throughout the world. And so we have local campus clubs that are devoted to justice or justice missions that are really mainly focused on eradicating sex trafficking in the seedier parts of America and across the world. But in biblical terms, the word justice really means putting broken things back together. One of the things that Jesus says early in his ministry, in his very first sermon, is that he has been sent to proclaim justice, recovery of sight for the blind, and healing for those who cannot walk and cannot hear. What we find Jesus doing all throughout his ministry is putting broken things back to right. And what's curious to me is that Jesus hardly ever does that with structures or systems. He almost always does that with people. This is part of what we see in his care for the oppressed. Jesus will care for those who are uncared for. He will love those who are unloved. By his society, he will welcome them in, give them presence in his sphere of influence, give them open space to be who they are. They listen to him, and in their listening to him, they resonate with his message and they repent. Now, there are several groups in the first century who would be classified in that sort of cast out from society group. They are the outcast, the alien, the orphan, the widow, the ones who their culture and society wouldn't have given much attention to. One of those groups were the tax collectors. Tax collectors were those who worked for the Roman Empire. The Jews who worked for the foreign occupying enemy. And because they did that, because they collected taxes for Rome, from among their own people, they were deemed traitors, and they were deemed to have forfeited their citizenship in ancient Israel. Jesus welcomed the tax collectors into his presence. Tax collectors like Matthew, tax collectors like Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector among them all. They came to Jesus, they listened to him, they resonated with his teaching, and they began to repent. Another group that Jesus spends a significant amount of time with are the sinners. Sometimes that word means those who lived a pretty lawless lifestyle. But particularly in Luke's gospel, it means those women who made their living by sexual trade. It's a really derogatory term. The word sinner is for prostitute. So you find Jesus trying to put those broken people back together, doing justice among them. There's a woman in Luke 7 who comes and anoints Jesus, caresses his feet and wipes them with her hair, pours oil and perfume all over him as a way of honoring him. She is described as a woman who was a sinner in the city. She's a known prostitute. And one of the objections by the Pharisee, Simon, at that point is if Jesus had known what kind of woman that was, he would not have let her touch him that way. Jesus welcomes these kinds of folks into his presence. So it is in Luke 15 when it says the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathering around Jesus. He means tax collectors and prostitutes. And in Luke's gospel it says that they were gathering around him to listen to him. Listening to Jesus meant taking in his message and really taking it to heart and living accordingly. And that's what they did. They repented. Jesus gave them free space to hear him, and they repented when they did so. Another group that was really looked down upon in the first century by Jews were Gentiles. Gentiles were not the chosen people. They were racially outcast from among the people of God. And one of the things we find Jesus doing is welcoming in all kinds of Gentiles into his presence, and in some cases praising them for the faith that they have, which is greater than the faith that his own people have in him. In Matthew chapter 8, there's a centurion, a Roman, a Gentile, who says that he believes Jesus is a man under supreme divine authority, just like he is. And the way he describes it makes Jesus say, there's nobody in all of Israel who's got that kind of faith in me. He praises this Gentile in front of his own people. The final group that were really outcast among the Jewish people were the poor, the really down and out poor. And one of the things that Jesus does for us is contrast this whole #blessed movement with some of his own statements about the poor. We tend to think that we are blessed when God showers us with unexpected money. And we'll say, oh, God is so good when something good happens to us. Or we'll say, man, God blessed me so much by giving me this gift. Jesus says, blessed are the poor.